down through the walls to the base. Keep having the pages fall off the thing. I love the sound of this hi-hat. And this fat bass and snare sound. This cool sample. And this is a TD3. TD3, it's an old one, but I gotta turn the bass down on this, man. I'm gonna get in trouble. I'll get fired if I keep doing that. Don't want to piss off everyone else. That's a little better. It's still loud. I do not like the position of this hi-hat. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's just try to put the phone in front of all the pages. Hopefully, I got this on a music stand, so okay. Stay everything. Got my pages everywhere. Got Tom Sawyer on the ground. 16th notes on the high. Well, here's if anyone wants a little cheat sheet for some stuff to work on. Got some dotted eighths tied to 16ths in there. Actually, there's some cool patterns on here, actually, like down towards the bottom, too. It's actually just, I would pause and freeze on this frame if I were you, if I'm a drummer. This is like one of the foundational pages that will lead into all sorts of other bass drum figures. And you want to, I teach all my students, too, that you want to play these eighths, so they're syncopated, and then you also want to play one-handed 16ths and then single-stroke 16ths. So the way that it's written, you know, is to play single-stroke 16ths. Where you're playing, you know, right, left, right, left, right, left for your 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Obviously, number 1, you just got beat 1 and 3 on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the snare. That's easy. You can do that in your sleep, but that's the foundational groove. That's what the whole universe of drums expands off of. So what I'm saying, though, is you want to play this with eighths. You want to play it with one-handed 16ths and then single-stroke 16ths, and you want to do it for the whole page. So that kind of changes things, right? So then that way you get a chance to play them syncopated, and you get a chance to play them stacked, and then you also get a chance to play the bass drum, you know, training your independence to match with some of the left hand. Because anything that's a 16th note in the bass drum figure, if it's on the like the dotted eighths tied to a 16th, you can think a dotted eighth tied to 16ths, the first and the last, the rock sign, the first and the last of a group of 16th notes, 1 E and right? A dotted eighth tied to a 16th note is just the 1 and the So that's what it sounds like. 1 1 So you play it in a bass drum, 1 2 and 3 4 and bass snare and bass snare. But if you're playing eighth notes, that 16th won't stack with the eighth notes. So your hand's going to be up in the air when that 16th comes down. So just saying that these are actually by mistake falling off pages, but these are good to follow. So these patterns are really cool, especially towards the bottom. Actually, I might even play some of these. Okay, and then oh yeah, got Tom Sawyer here. This is like, you know, for it's only maybe 2 of my students can even play this. Actually, I have one student, Alex. He's the one who brought this song in because it was like the last one he could find for free on a certain site, and he's like 7 or 8 years old, and he can play it. I mean, not note for note with all the fills and, you know, all the 30-second notes, because, you know, it's got like those triplets in it anyway. And it says in a video about Tom Sawyer, but that you get the point. But yeah, so I can't believe that this little 7-year-old is just crushing Tom Sawyer. It's crazy. So he's the one who brought that in. But this page, this is a great page, great foundational page with some good bass drum figures in it. So maybe I'll just make a little instructional video. I'm in between students right now. I got a little break. But it's out of this book is what it's out of, this page. I just copy it for my students that can't afford books or they don't have a book. If they, you know, need the page for homework and to do that, then I just copy it for them. So that's why I have these copies. So, but it is out of that book, and it's page 25 out of this book. And then basically, once you get to page like 27 in this book, then you pretty much conquered book 1. And then we get into book 2 here. So book 2, that's where things start to get pretty serious. So book 2, you know, all sorts of linear, highly syncopated, 2-bar figures, odd time, cut time versus half time versus common time versus everything. Playing, oh, these are some super cool linear patterns that are in 4/4. Really, they're like tongue twisters. If you're a drummer, these are like some of the most fun ones to play because they're tongue twisters. They really are. So I would freeze on this page too if I were you, if I was a drummer. But yeah, this page, just look at, and they're 2-bar patterns. So like one, you know, number 1 would be bass, hat, 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 snare, hat, snare, bass, hat, bass, snare, hat. So, and you have eighth notes in there, so then you have to have a little rest after that eighth note in going into bar 2. Then you have bass, hat, snare, bass, or snare, bass, hat, snare. Sorry, I'm looking at it backwards and trying to remember what the figures are. But those are really great linear patterns. So that's kind of what we do here at the Academy, and so we have a good curriculum, and then just kind of the stuff I've learned along the way, and from Russell, my mentor. And then here's some 2-4 linear patterns. So if you're new to linear, these are great to start with because they're only in 2-4, and you're just playing 16ths. You're only counting 2 beats, so your snare is going to reliably be on beat 1 or beat 2, and that your bass is going to be on beat 1. You might have like a 1E in the bass drum figure, like bass, bass, hat, hat, snare, hat, hat, hat. But you can anchor around that. 1, 2, 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a bass, bass, hat, hat, snare, bass. I'm like just counting the syllables as you would go through the patterns. So you want to play them, one limb at a time is the rule with linear, basically. So no 2 limbs ever come down at the same time. Okay, so that's what we start with. Then we go to the 4-4 patterns, the linear patterns. And man, those are some tongue twisters. Like, they're even tough for me. So, these will like kind of melt your brain after a little bit. Just because there's so many different figures in it. And so many different parts where you have to give space and really, really get the good feel of it and allow the space to happen. Because you kind of want to rush to the next note, And these are in 4-4 plus 2-bar patterns. So it changes things. It definitely changes things. So those are some cool linear ones. Okay, I guess this turned into like a little share some free info. I'll probably get in trouble from the book vendors, but whatever. I'm all about the educational part of it and that kind of stuff. So that sheet that I was showing, that's just kind of the intro to playing syncopation and the stack, 16ths, and all those different ways. So I'll just play a couple of them so you get, that way when you freeze it, then you can kind of hear what they're supposed to sound like in different ways, okay? So obviously, just the foundational beat was number 1. You're playing it with 8s, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, or however many bars you want to play, okay? But then you want to be playing it with 16ths. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a. Okay, and then with single stroke 16ths. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a. So you get the kind of idea. So that way you're training your body to work in a different way than you would if you're only used to always leading with your right, or only playing 16ths single stroke, or only, or syncopation is hard for you, or, all those different things. These type of patterns really, really help with that. And breaking stuff down nice and slow. Practice speed is always slow. At your most relaxed, where your body understands what you're trying to tell it to do, right? Okay? So, let's choose one of the harder ones now that has the syncopation in it. So this one, I guess, I'll just start with number 5 is the first one that has a dotted 8th tied to a 16th in it. And the figure in the bass drum is 1 and 3 up. Bass, bass, 3 up. But see how I was saying the 1 and the but it's on beat 3. So it's 3 up 4. 1 and 2 and 3 up 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 up 4. See how my hand's up in the air when that comes down? 3 up 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 up 4. And then 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and I played actually a dotted 8th on that. 1 and 2, 3 up 4. There it is. 1 and 2, 3 up 4. With 16th, one-handed 16th, same thing with single strokes. 1 and 2, 3 up 4. Because now that 16th is going to stack with your left hand. 1 and 3 up. 1 and 3 up. 1 and. And you can just see 3 up. 1 and 3 up. 1 and 3 up. But you embellish, just embellish off of it. But that's a really good one for syncopation. That's kind of the intro to syncopation, is a dotted 8th tied to a 16th. But that's how it's phrased. That's where your hand will be up in the air, 4. Okay, 4. is how your hand's going to land. So if you're new to syncopation, I have some kiddos that follow my channel and students, so hopefully this is helpful to some people. But like I said, you want to practice some different ways, because that 16th note is now going to stack with the of your left hand. Okay, and that's another thing, is that if you're ever going to play a downbeat or an and, if you're playing 16ths, 1, E, and if you know that if it's a downbeat or an and, it's going to be on your right hand. I'm talking about how the bass is going to stack with which hand. You know that if it's on an E or an it's going to stack with your left hand, right? Make sense? So 1 E and a 2 E and a. Now I'm just playing on the downbeats, right? 1, 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2 E and up, E and up, 4 E and up. Okay, and then if you're playing stuff like. That kind of stuff, that's what this leads to. It's single stroke 16, so that way you can play it relaxed and still get that feel in. But a lot of times it's cool just playing one hand, Or about 1 and 2, 3. Sorry, I get carried away sometimes. And out some goes. Carried away with it, but you get the point. Okay, so that's a cool one. Now further down on the page, then you have one that's on the and. It's 1 so dotted 8 tied to a 16. It's number 6. So it's 1 2 and 4. It's kind of cool. 2 and it's like a hip hop one, Boom, bop, boom, boom. It's with 8. It's with 1 2 and 4 and 1 2 and you can add the and 1 to it. And 1 and 4 and 1 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. They're just getting silly with it. But then same thing with single strokes. See, that's going to change things in your brain when you're playing open versus crossed versus syncopated versus stacked with one hand versus, okay. So that's what I really like to encourage my students to do. I hope it helps someone out there, because these patterns will really help with that. So I hope that you just pause on that page and the linear page. That linear stuff's really cool. And then some of the tougher ones I'll just play really fast. Number 7 is hard for a lot of my students because it's a 4E1. So you're basically doing 2 16ths tied to an 8th, but it's really just 2 16ths going into beat 1. But what it sounds like is just 1, 2, 3, 4E1. 2, 3, 4E1. 2, 3, 4E1. And 2 and 3. Okay, so that's with 8s, and then same thing, you want to do the same thing within your single strokes. 3, 4E1. 2, 3, 4E1. 2, 3, 4E1. 2, 3, 4E1. I can hear my coworkers laughing at me. Okay, and then last but not least was number 8, which is actually easier for my students to play than number 7. For whatever, it's just because it's after beat 4, I think. So that 4E1, where you're doing 4E1, the way it matches with your hands is weird. If you're doing 8s, L1. Then if you just stack it, see, that's the easiest way to figure something out a lot of times. 4E L1. 4E L1 is just plain stacked, you know, and slow, and usually one-handed 16ths. But the challenge of it is then getting with your single strokes, because it's going to stack in different ways. Remember what I said. If your bass drum's on the downbeat or an and, it's going to stack with your right if you're doing single stroke 16ths. If it's on an E or an up, it's going to stack with your right hand. Or I mean your left hand. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so right hand is going to be your downbeats and your ands. Left hand is going to be your E's and your U's. 1, E, and up. Makes intuitive sense, right? So that way you can just trust with your muscle memory that, okay, if I see a bass drum figure that's on an E or a up, I know it's going to stack with my left. If I see it's on a downbeat or an and, I know it's going to stack with my right hand. Okay? Hopefully that helps. But yeah, then we get into that book 2 with the 2-bar patterns and stuff with it, a lot of 16th notes in the bass drum. I'll play a couple of those linear things for you just so you get the sense of it, what it sounds like, and then that way you can kind of get an idea for how much of a tongue twister these things can turn into. But the first one I'm doing is the one that's in 2/4, okay? And remember, you're just counting 2 beats to the measure, 16th notes, so it's just 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a. Okay, and that's what number 1 is 1 E and a 2 E and a bass hat hat hat. Remember, nothing comes down at the same time. And it helps if you exaggerate your motion if you're not used to this first. So that's why I'm really moving my hands high, because it helps to fit those notes in if you're not used to playing a lot of linear stuff or hand and foot stuff, you know, like that fill that I did a little while ago. Now that's an easy fill too. I described that in another video. But it's just, you know, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 E and a. It's a 2-bar one. Okay, so that number 1. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a. Bass hat 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 snare cat. Bass kid cat cat snare snare cat cat. Get that snare cat cat cat. Snare cat cat cat. Okay, that's easy enough, right? And you can play these in a stacked way too, because if it was stacked, it would just be. Also a great thing to do is play them both ways, okay? Number 2, that's the one that had the 1 E, the double bass on it. Number 2 is 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and See, they're just having fun, because as long as you're only playing one limb at a time, then you're playing linear, so you know, you can kind of embellish with it, you know, like a. Yeah, you get the point, but. Those are some really cool ones, and then they have ones that have that like dotted eighth tied to a 16th figure in it. That's a cool one. And then let's see, I'll do another one where you're doing a lot of hand foot stuff is. And then they get pretty tricky where you're doing oh, see, I had to take my eyes off the page. I thought I got it into my head, but apparently it didn't. So that's a great one to practice. And the ones that are in 4/4, I promise this. I know it's a super long video, but it's got worthwhile information in it. Promise. Okay, and then the 4-bar ones. So that's the one that was counting. Those are really cool. They're the tongue twister ones. So just number one was and. I'll count the syllables for you too as I play it, so that way it makes more sense. But it's in 4/4, not 2/4, okay? So it's 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and E and a 3 E and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Okay, that's a cool one. Then they get pretty complex and crazy. Like one involves then going around with the toms. This one is oh yeah, that's a weird one. Oh, yeah, that was it though. You can play it different ways too, but yeah, okay, so if I count syllables, sorry, I'm getting lost having fun. If you count syllables for you, it would be 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E. Okay? So yeah, it's a weird one. 4 and actually is what it would be. 4 and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 and 3 E and 4 and 1. That's what it was. That's how you would count. Okay? Alright guys. Long video, I know. But I had a break and my next student's gonna be here 15 minutes, and I always like to keep the hands moving and just try to share some information and have fun and whatever. But hopefully this helps someone. I don't know if it will, but some playing in it and some cool patterns. I promise, guys. I promise. I know it's like sometimes that stuff is frustrating to play, or it's like, oh, I'm not good at doing that. I don't want to try it, but I promise it. Just do it nice and relaxed, slow tempo. Practice speed is always slow. Get that nice comfortable going. Remember, eighth notes, one-handed 16ths, single stroke 16ths, playing them all different ways, okay? Because it's going to train your muscle memory in a different way, and your hands are going to stack in a different way depending on how you're playing. And then I'll, in a future video, show, but it's cool because then you can start adding some ghosts and playing one-handed 16ths with it, and then embellishing, quite a bit more with what you're playing within those patterns. But it's all about those bass drum patterns and the backbeat. So as long as you're getting those dotted eighth tied to 16ths, 2 16ths tied to an eighth, the reverse and eighth tied to 2 16ths, fast 16th notes like a 1E, or even a 3, something like a 3, 4, 1, 2, a 3, 4, things like that. That's really going to help train your muscle memory in a different way and really lead to a lot of really cool patterns that you can play in the future. So, alright guys, and by no means do I claim to be a master at all. I just, I've studied this stuff myself and I have to know it because I have to teach it. So, see ya.